to the 25-26 Supplementary Capacity Stakeholder Information Session. My name's Aidan Barker. I'm the Manager for WA Government and Stakeholder Engagement here at AMO in the West, and joined today by our main presenter, Kung Chu, who's the Manager for WA Registrations, Monitoring and Procurement. Okay, so we'll just move on into the next slide and get going. So, like I said, I'm very pleased to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, seas, waters across Australia, and AMO honours the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past and present and embrace future generations. And I'm joining you today from Wajak Noongar land in the Boorloo or Perth area, and it's now nearly a month into Jilba, or first spring, and I feel like we're really just having our first really nice day as well. So worth noting, and if you have an opportunity to do so, please do get outside at lunch if you're in Perth, because it's a cracker. Okay, next slide. Most of you would probably already be pretty familiar with this slide already, but it unfortunately doesn't go without saying. So talking about our meeting protocol and just a little bit of a reminder regarding Australian competition law, and specifically the Competition and Consumer Act of 2010, a couple of do's and don'ts. So in terms of participating in today's discussion, try and make sure that the discussions are limited to the content of the meeting today. The content has been structured such that it will comply with the law, and also when you're making decisions, they're your own, not ours. And also, if you feel that a matter is being discussed that might give rise to competition law concerns, please put your hand up and raise it. Don't stay silent. Also, in terms of things not to talk about, obviously who you supply to, the price at which you supply it, your strategies in the market, and who you might not supply to as well. Just things to keep in mind as we're having discussions and asking questions. Next slide. So just in terms of online housekeeping and how we're going to run today's session, this will be pretty familiar to those who participated in the last WA Electricity Consultative Forum. You may have noticed at the top of your screen a little Q&A tab. So that's how we're going to be doing Q&A, questions and answers for today's session. We will pause throughout the presentation, so there's nice little breaks where there's an opportunity to talk around immediate clarifying questions relating to the section that's just been discussed. For more detailed questions or questions of a more general nature, we'll tackle them at the end where we've got a space for Q&A as well. We also will, to the extent that it's possible and appropriate, if the question is really clear or relatively straightforward, try and answer it in the chat as well so that you've got the answer there. So please put it in the Q&A. Don't put it in the chat function, because the Q&A function is what we're looking at. We've also published a FAQ, intended guideline, on our website, and also there's vendor panel as well. There's links to those at the end of this slide pack. We will also be endeavouring to incorporate the answers to some of the questions asked today into that FAQ document, just to ensure that everybody has access to the same source of information. We're 5 years in, as I was just saying to a colleague earlier on, but still we make little mistakes in terms of Teams protocol. Usually it's more about not going unmute rather than ensuring you are, but if you can, ensure that you are on mute. If there's a question requiring a little bit of clarification or exposition, we will actually invite you to go on camera and turn your mic on and ask the question yourself. If when you're doing that, you can just identify who you are and where you come from, that would be very much appreciated. Otherwise, please have your microphone on mute. And finally, we'll be recording today's session and we'll publish a copy of the presentation, including all of the links as well, on our webpage in the supplementary capacity area of AMO's website. Okay, well, with that, we'll move on to the agenda for today's presentation. So to talk about this, I might actually now hand over to Kang, as he is the sole speaker in today's session, to walk us through what you're going to talk about today and what people can expect.
Thank you very much, Hayden. Appreciate the introductions and also leading us through that beginning section. I also will be supported by Matthew Fairclough. He will be supporting me with the Q&A, so if you do see some messaging coming through, that's probably himself. In terms of the agenda today, I want to cover these particular sections, and then we'll have breaks not breaks, gaps in between where you can maybe raise any questions in relation to those sections. So first of all, we'll be covering an overview of the tender. Next is the context of supplementary capacity. Then followed by providing supplementary capacity, the general service terms. Then followed by key changes in the supplementary process relative to last year's process. Then covering the tender process, and then having an allowance for questions at the very end, and then providing some guiding information for next steps to participate in the tender, and I guess important dates to consider if you are to apply. So first of all, the overview of the tender is that AEMO has opened the tender and it's now available on vendor panel. After this session, we'll be providing a copy of the slides, so you can also click on this particular link to find the link for the tender, and also that you're able to register and look at the information. But in essence, the tender is for supplementary capacity up to a service level of 142 megawatts. We are inviting tender submissions for the two types of supplementary services, the first being availability and activation service, and the second being activation only service. In terms of the supplementary capacity that we're going to procure, the general gist is that it is, or it should be, additive capacity that is otherwise not available from the wholesale electricity market, such as the reserve capacity mechanism or non-co-optimized essential system services contract that we have now. In terms of key dates to look out for the tender, it is that we've opened the tender what would have been the 20th of August last week, or just over a week ago, and obviously we have today's stakeholder session. The tender date itself will be on the 15th, the tender closure date will be on the 15th of September at noon. And in terms of notifying the shortlisted tenderers, that will occur from the date of 6th of October to the 17th of October. We'll obviously be endeavouring to do it as early as possible, but there is a bit of a buffer if evaluation does take a bit longer. And then finally, we're looking to target the contracts to commence on the 1st of December in time for the start of the hot season. So context, so why do we have supplementary capacity? It is a additional mechanism on top of the reserve capacity mechanism itself, which is to ensure sufficient energy production, sufficient capacity from energy producing systems or demand side capacity to meet peak demands of the Swiss or the WEM in 2 years' time. It starts off with us publishing an ESO in June annually, and then us setting the reserve capacity requirement for that future period. After which, capacity providers can apply for certified reserve capacity, where AEMO will then assess those applications, and if we approve it, then you will get paid in return for that certified reserve capacity. After which, AEMO will certify the capacity credits and assign the capacity credits, and then as the leading up to the year of delivery, capacity providers will prepare and then be ready to deliver the capacity in that capacity year. For that service, market customers will pay for that peak capacity service, and then AEMO will basically remit that money to the capacity providers. So how does supplementary capacity fit in? It is a component of the RCM, which also further ensures reliability of supply. SC is a process to enable the procurement of additional capacity if there is a shortfall identified by the Electricity Statement of Opportunities, or ESO, for the upcoming hot season. It is procured through a competitive tender process, and AMO is required to enter into the lowest cost mix under the ESM rules. AMO may call for tenders or negotiate directly. So there are two mechanisms. We effect the tender first, and if we see a need for more capacity, we may negotiate with potential providers of SC afterwards, after the tender. And in terms of the service dates, AMO can confirm that the period will be for the entire hot season for this upcoming hot season period. So from the 1st of December through to the 1st of April, based on trading days. In terms of the capacity shortfall and the SC trigger this year, AMO has commenced the tender process for the 142 megawatts. We determined the amount based on the likelihood and extent of capacity shortfalls, taking into account the following inputs: major outages that we know of, fuel disruptions, and delays to the connection of new committed capacity. The ESU this year identified a potential shortfall of 50 megawatts for the upcoming hot season from the dispatchable capacity. And in terms of that shortfall, it was just a shortfall of supply of peak demand for that 2025 summer period. In terms of how we derive the additional megawatts for going up to 142, we did identify after the ESO that there was some non-co-optimized essential system service contracts that we had expected prior to publishing the ESO, or at the time of publishing the ESO, that was not going to be able to be delivered for the upcoming hot season. And that was to the quantum of 92 megawatts. So included in that was basically Anchor's contracts that were either reduced or were late to commence. So that did include an amount of 50 megawatts for the delay of Linter Wagerup BESS project, which we are now expecting to be available at the start of the hot season, but just not, but not at the very onset, but will be available at the start of the 2026 calendar period. In terms of how else we derive the target, we must be using the most recent published forecast and method outlined in clause 4.5.9a and b of the ESM rules, and that considers the expected start date and end dates of the shortfall, which we set to the 1st of December through to the 1st of April. We must determine the expected quantity of the shortfall, which we've done so in the form of 142, and now we are running the tender and potentially direct negotiations as we see fit to basically address that shortfall. So that's more so the rules basis. In terms of supplementary capacity target, I just want to just provide a bit of context relative to last year. So in the previous hot season, the SC target was 285 megawatts, of which AMO was able to procure 217.7 megawatts through a combination of the tender and also direct negotiation. For this particular year, it has actually changed a bit, and the SC target has now reduced to 142 megawatts. So really what we're expecting this year is that the requirement being less and the number of megawatts contracted last year, there's a likelihood that we're probably going to be, I guess, receiving more tenders than our expected target amount. I'll probably pause there before I go on to the next section. Did anyone have any I guess, questions directed at the content that we have for clarifying? Otherwise,
no questions in the chat, but we do have Paul Arias with his hand up. Paul, do you want to speak to your question?
Thanks, Aidan. Hi, Kangi. Sorry, I joined slightly late, but I did catch on to the volume discussion you were mentioning there. Does that mean that AEMO, and remind me, AEMO can both run its tender but then engage providers that have not provided a response to the tender, given the volume expectations? Is AEMO solely focused on the tender process?
Yes, AEMO will be focusing on the tender process as the first process for procurement. And if there is I guess, a shortfall or appetite for more megawatts after the tender has been completed, we may engage in direct negotiation, but the tender will be our first and primary focus. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Thanks, Kang. Yeah, appreciate it.
No worries. So the next section is in regards to providing the supplementary capacity and the high-level service requirements. So for this particular hot season, we are running it from the start to the end of the hot season. In terms of days, that equates to 121 days. And a point of difference from last year is that we are increasing the minimum service quantity from 1 megawatts to 5 megawatts, really to help try to streamline the tender process, but also allow AEMO to contract, I guess, higher levels of dispatchable quantities. In terms of the service type, we are allowing those two contract service types of active availability and activation only for load reduction resources. In terms of the service period for both contracts, we are shifting the service period by half an hour from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. The half an hour commencing for each trading day. And another significant change from last hot season is we are introducing the concept of extended service period for the AO contract service only. So what does that mean? I guess put simply, we're allowing people on the AO contract to nominate whether they're available for extended service period activation starting from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and also after the service period from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. midnight. Really, that's coming through as a change that we thought we may need in, I guess, in a worst case scenario where we see shortfalls outside of our normal service period. And we're inviting the AO on best endeavours or on a voluntary basis to provide that particular service if they're able to. In terms of AO service, it is voluntary for both the service period and the extended service period, just to clarify. And in terms of another change we are implementing this year, we are including a consideration for excluded transmission node identifiers, which are areas where load curtailment services should not be, I guess, providing a load service, and we're publishing a list on our website, really due to known or calculated constraints where we've seen in the past where we have load reduction services and it's not providing additive capacity to the Swiss. In terms of the specific details for the two services, availability and activation, I just want to cover some of those aspects. So for availability and activation, the service can be provided by registered facilities and unrestricted equipment. The service quantities that we're expecting can range from a minimum of 5 megawatts through to the maximum of 142 being the total procurement amount. In terms of, and I should caveat, this is on a contract basis. I'm just highlighting the parameters. The service period is preferred to be 5 hours, but if it is less than that, we will still consider it. The event duration can range from 2 hours to 5 hours, being the minimum maxima for the event for that particular contracted service. And this service is remunerated through two mechanisms. First, the availability payment as per the contract, and then activation payment based on the type of service or equipment that you are. AEMO will, though, not be paying for availability if the facility or equipment is unavailable. And that's, I guess, pretty self-evident. And in terms of ANA, we do have a verification test requirement that we'll be applying. So that's a condition precedent where we will require you to nominate intervals to show that you've demonstrated that service quantity as per the contract prior to the contract starting. In terms of payment, there's just a thing to note. If you are a registered facility, we won't pay you via a separate income stream or line that is paid for via the normal market processes, looking at your market quantities, and then you receive that in the same way you normally would for market activated quantities through the real-time markets mechanism. In terms of the activation only service and the parameters for that particular contract, the service can only be provided by unregistered equipment, so those that aren't a registered facility already. It is a service quantity ranging from a minimum of 5 megawatts to a maximum of 142 megawatts, the tender maximum. In terms of the service periods that it can provide service for, it is the service period and also the extended service period. So that totals to 11 hours that you could possibly provide for a trading day. And in terms of how we operationally will administer it, AMO will, on best endeavours, to try to contact the service provider 24 hours beforehand, where we are, I guess, cognizant of the risks of dispatch or activation, and we will try to notify those providers so they have a heads up. In terms of the service itself, it is voluntary activation, and I guess there's us asking for the service and then us trying to get an understanding of whether you can provide it. But yes, there is no availability payment, hence there's no availability obligations, but we do expect people to try their best. In terms of how that will occur, there are activation notices that will be issued by AMO within the nominated notification period that has been stipulated in the contract. And in terms of the service, whilst I think historically we've typically just activated once, noting that there are extended service periods, it could be possible that there could be 2 activations in a given trading day, I guess, in a challenging or a worst case scenario. And noting that we do have extended service periods, we obviously will preference AO tender submissions that have that flexibility to volunteer in the extended service period time. And lastly, in terms of remuneration, the activation payment will be paid upon successful activation of your contract, and then to the relative quantity that you provided to your baseline. With regards to the contract commencing as well, and also contractual obligations, I just want to focus on network access. It is a requirement under the rules to ensure that all equipment and services do have network access, but I just want to step that through in terms of things we'll be looking at for this year. So service providers must ensure they obtain network operator authorization for network access for all their services. That's just a requirement under the ESM rules. But in particular, for how we're going to, I guess, assess or review that, we did want to highlight that if you do have a generating system that does have an aggregate capacity over 30 kVA, and that is capable of operating in parallel with the Swiss during the contract term, the service provider must provide reasonable evidence that Western Power has approved the network access with respect to parallel mode of operation. In terms of service providers and those that have generating units, we also wanted to be able to confirm that the NIMI is compliant with the applicable ESM rules or technical rules and can support supporting evidence to AMO before the NIMI can be added to the contract. And that can occur prior to the contract commencing, or it can occur during the contract where you have a new NIMI. And in terms of being able to get support or providing that evidence, we recommend that you do contact Western Power via the network.access@westernpower.com.au email, just for those types of general queries, or just to get clarifying information that can support with your evidence that you provide to AMO. In terms of verification, testing, measurement and baseline quantity, just want to cover some of those aspects. So for the ANA service, there is a verification test prior to the contract commencing, so to demonstrate your maximum service quantity. For AO, that requirement doesn't exist. For the quantity of energy production or load reduction from the service equipment, that really entails 2 consecutive trading intervals during the service period. And we are looking for basically a demonstration of above or equal to the MSQ relative to your baseline for your type of equipment. In terms of measuring your service, for registered facilities, for the relevant service trading intervals, we're using the interval meter data that's installed by Western Power. And for the relevant dispatch intervals, we may also use SCADA, Western Power SCADA meters, just to see or monitor your performance in real time. For unregistered equipment, we'll be looking at the national meter identifier associated with your contestable customer and looking at that interval meter data as provided by the meter data agent. In terms of the baseline quantity, the registered facilities, their baseline quantity will be dictated by the megawatt quantity of capacity credits held by the service equipment for the 2025-26 capacity year, being the baseline that they have to demonstrate additive capacity for. For unregistered equipment, the baseline is dictated by Schedule 4 of the relevant standard form contract. And just to confirm, there has been no change to the baseline methodology from the previous year's contract. We touched on it a bit, but just to clarify, the payments will vary by the contract and service type that you are providing the service for. For registered facilities, we're just using the existing settlement mechanisms for WEM invoicing. For unregistered equipment, we'll be looking at the payment method depending on whether you're a market participant or whether you're a non-market participant. With unregistered equipment, we'll be either using the existing WEM mechanisms if you are a market participant, but if you're not, we'll look at using a EFT mechanism to ensure that you are paid for your services. And just to clarify, with activation-only services, the payment is the same as for unregistered equipment.
Hi, Kang. We've got a question from Dimitri Lorenzo regarding the potential for temporary DSOC increases. Dimitri, do you want to speak to your question?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it. I just wanted to ask if Western Power is going to consider temporary DSOC increases and if AEMO will endorse that.
Yes, so I think if Western Power do grant the temporary DSOC and have the relevant documentation and it's been executed, AEMO will definitely consider and endorse this for the provision of service. I think that's in line with just even the existing DSOCs. So I think that shouldn't be a barrier for us to consider that as a service, well, as a supplementary capacity quantity.
Excellent. Thank you.
And we've got a question from Ganesh as well. So his question is around participation in SRC and whether it affects NEMI's ability to be certified. Ganesh, can you speak to that question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I just wanted to understand how would it would affect a NEMI's ability to be certified as NTTL if it participates in the SRC program and curtails when called upon by AEMO?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head, so sorry, Ganesh, I'll probably have to take this one on notice and review the respective rules for NTDL, whether there's any, I guess, considerations for SC dispatch.
Okay, thanks. And I had another question, probably, I think perhaps I could find this, the answer to it myself. Like, how many megawatts of the 285 that was procured last hot season by AEMO was was activated by AEMO?
Yes.
Ganesh,
we've answered that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Matthew, can you clarify that?
Oh, okay, sorry, Ganesh. We just popped the answer to that in the Q&A section. So we actually contracted with 217.70 megawatts of supplementary capacity, and we activated all of it several times. I've included a link to where the details of the responses are from the Real-Time Market Insights Forum in April.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh, and thank you, Matthew. There's no further questions on this section, so we'll just move on.
Okay, thanks, Aidan. So just want to spend a bit of time on the key changes in the SE contracts. So first of all, to clarify the types of standard form contracts we have available this year, we are making the existing registered facility, unregistered load equipment, and activation only load reduction standard contracts available, but there have been updates to them. Noticeably, what we haven't provided this year is the residential DER contract, which now has been removed. The reasoning for that is that we view that the residential DER eligible services can still participate, but using the existing unregistered equipment contract and those terms stipulated in that contract. If there is interest or ability to provide SC in that area, what we'd recommend is to review the unregistered equipment contract, but also consider the amendments to cater for non-contestable meters. Other than that, we think that the unregistered equipment contract will be fit for purpose for that particular service. In terms of allowing voluntary activation by AO services, we are envisioning that it is a reasonable endeavours basis outside of the service period. That being from 1 to 4 p.m. and 9 to 12 midnight. AMO is really envisioning that it is really to be dispatched when we see real-time outcomes in the market will be insufficient to ensure the power system security and power system reliability standards that we want. In terms of the minimum activation periods, we are being explicit this year to saying that it is a minimum of 2 hours set for both A&A service and AO service contracts. Really, from an operational standpoint, that's what we see as being a useful quantity, minimum quantity. And in terms of the maximum activation duration periods, a maximum of 11 hours for the AO contracts, being the service period duration and also extended service period duration. But also, I guess, the caveat to those who are in the AO service area or interested in extended service period, it is voluntary, and that's the maximum time range. And lastly, the minimum service quantity we've set to 5 megawatts for all contract tenders. Other key changes are we are allowing temporary reductions for maximum service quantity due to unforeseen situations or bona fide reasons, such as temporary network constraints or outages. In terms of the verification test turnaround times, we have extended it 10 business days to be performed by AMO from the date of notification by the service provider, or allowing another 3 extra days if AMO hasn't received meter data for those particular verification dates, because there have been instances where even after 10 business days, AMO hasn't received the complete set of metering data. In terms of the extension of 10 business days, this has really been done due to some known instances where it has exceeded 3 business days, but it's also been done reviewing the meter code, noting that that could be the maximum duration of meter data provision of up to 7 business days to AMO, but allowing AMO 3 business days to review it afterwards. That is the maximum. AMO will be endeavouring to do it as soon as practicable from when we do have the meter data, but the increase of 10 business days is just to build in some of those meter data code allowances for when data could be delayed. For A&A contracts, there will be the ability to increase your MSQ or maximum service quantity in the case where you may have either experienced a reduction at the onset of your contract, or whether there could have been a possible reduction due to a verification test. And we are allowing those that can provide a tranche of equal to or up to 5 megawatts to give a subset so that they can basically restore up to their MSQ or as per the initial contract terms. I probably wanted to pause there. Did anyone have any clarifying questions on the changes?
There's a question from Brad Smart just regarding aggregation behind a tinny and requirements thereof. Brad, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, pretty much what it says on the box. You've lifted the minimum to 5 megawatts. Are aggregations either resi or commercial contestable still required to be behind a single tinny, or are they able to be spread across multiple tinnies for this purpose of this service?
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I can answer that. So no, for the purposes of supplementary capacity this hot season, they don't have to be all aggregated behind a single tinny. They can be across multiple. But on the caveat that they're not in one of the excluded tinny zones or areas. Any other questions in regards to contract changes?
No other questions in the chat?
Okay. In terms of communications with AEMO, I guess either in relation to once your contract has, once you're in the shortlisting phase, or either after your contract has commenced, we just want to highlight the two main I guess areas of communication and their functions. So the first being the contractual management aspect for SE tenders and contractual aspects, including verification tests, contract commencement, contract queries, and contract variations, to direct your email to supplementary capacity at aemo.com. It will be monitored by, I guess, my team and also an operational team, and then we'll look to, I guess, delegate to the right area. But also for operational matters, for the SE providers, such as for the purposes of dispatch or service unavailability, activation issues, to email that particular email. So our operational team, the energy market management team, can also see that and address it in a timely manner. For something more pressing, we do also recommend that you use the telephone line if it's in a matter in relation to unavailability or activation, as we do want to address that as soon as practicable. But obviously you can still email us in regards to issues via that email supplementary capacity at aemo.com.au. As always, there can always be regulatory changes to supplementary capacity. I just wanted to highlight a potential change that may impact this particular supplementary capacity cycle or process. AEMO is cognizant of the following rule change, clause 7.13.1 FA. It is captured in the WEM Amendment Cost Allocation Rules, Schedule 2. It has been approved, but it hasn't been, I guess, affected yet. It is still waiting waiting confirmation of approval from the minister. And if it does get approved before the 1st of December, the impact is that AEMO will be required to publish 1 business day after the settlement date for the respective trade week estimates of total quantity of energy in megawatt hours for unregistered facilities to reduce consumption in relation to the SE contract. And we'll be looking to publish that on the AEMO website. AEMO is preparing for that, I guess, change. And once it has been confirmed, we'll look to provide the broader market details of where they can find those details. But we just didn't want to jump the gun yet. But just want to signal that to you if it does come into play for this hot season.
Kung, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one's from Paul Arias again regarding temporary reduction rights. Paul, do you want to speak to that?
Thanks, Aidan. It was just a couple of slides previous around the new amendments around temporary reductions. Are they both in favour of AEMO and the service provider? So the service providers could nominate to have a temporary reduction for a range of issues.
It was more so in favour for the market participant. I think there are possible scenarios where the particular service can't be provided as per the initial contract terms, and we just wanted, I guess, a simpler contractual process to allow them to reduce due to genuine reasons, as opposed to having to notify us of the unavailability and then possibly triggering some other clauses. We just wanted a cleaner, more easier administrative way to deal with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And another question from Kirsten McKenzie. Kirsten, can you speak to your question?
Hi, yes, I suppose this one is fairly nuanced. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we
We
can.
can hear
Kirsten.
Okay. So this facility has held capacity credits in prior years. However, the load associated is owned, or the CMD and the DSOC are owned by two different entities. I was wondering if having capacity credits in a prior year for generation would inhibit the ability for the site to apply for a load reduction under supplementary capacity credits.
Yes, I think that there's probably some nuance in the rules for these scenarios and timings as well. So I'll probably have to take this question on notice and refer to the rules, because I think they're quite explicit with the capacity years and how there are restrictions. So if I could get back to you or consider that in an FAQ.
Cool. That would be great. Thank you.
No further questions.
Thanks, Aidan. So now I just want to cover the tender process in general. So the tender submission must include the following aspects: a fully completed tender form for the service type that you are tendering, a proposed NIMI spreadsheet as complete as you possibly can, noting that sometimes that you are in the process of trying to get customers. We are just asking for best endeavours. A full and completed signed acknowledgement form in relation to your tender submission. As an option, we note there is the option to propose a contract amendment, including those to Schedule 4 baseline quantity and actual service quantity. But I did want to point out, if you are going to propose those any type of contract amendments, we're requiring a marked up version of the applicable standard form contract in Word format using track changes. And then also to address why the proposed amendment is justified by reference to clause 424.14. The reasoning being is AMO does really want to get clarity on the proposed change, and we also need, justification as per the rules for 24.14. As part of the contract amendment proposal, AMO, by way of just notice and warning, AMO can't accept contract amendments after the tender has closed. The reasoning being it does pose equity issues, and it is part of our tender evaluation criteria as well. The proposed or nature of changes that you want to the contract prior to us shortlisting. In terms of potential providers making submissions, they can do it for both ANA and AO services for the same unregistered equipment. AMO will look at both considerations, but only select one of them, noting that it is for the singular piece of equipment or customer. And in terms of the tender submission format and deadlines, the tenders must be submitted by the vendor panel platform by closing date of 12 p.m. noon on the 15th of September 2025. In relation to the pricing that you submit with your tender, just wanted to go over these aspects. So ANA service providers must offer an availability price, dollar per trading day, a activation price of dollar per megawatt hour for unregistered equipment, where this price must reflect the direct or opportunity costs incurred. And for the activation only service providers, they should consider the activation dollar per megawatt hour, where this price should reflect their direct or opportunity costs incurred. And in terms of AMO's consideration for tenders, we obviously want to receive tenders below the price limits, and those that are above the upper price limits, will not, it says will not be published. So it will not be shortlisted, you should say. That's a typo there. It will not be considered. In terms of the tender assessment, ANA and ANO, in assessing ANA tender submissions, I just wanted to go through the requirements here. AMO must consider under 424.8 of the ESM rules to only accept an offer for the provision of an eligible service where AMO considers the service will be available during peak times of times of peak demand. We are seeking to obtain the lowest cost mix of SC contracts, and we must be reasonably satisfied that the SC provider has network access where based on their circumstances. In regards to assessing AO tender submissions, AMO under 424.8A must only accept an offer for the provision of eligible service as defined under the ESM rules, have regard to the availability restrictions and notification times for that particular tender, and be reasonably satisfied that SC provider has network access as well based on their circumstances. In addition to the above, AMO is very much seeking in this tender period to have tenders that have a shorter minimum notification time. So that's the time that if AMO were to call on you, you could activate your equipment to deliver your service quantity. The shorter it is, the higher we will preference it. In terms of the maximum, minimum and maximum activation duration times, we are wanting more of a flexibility. So the tender form will stipulate what is your minimum event duration time and what is your maximum event duration time. What we're really seeking is more flexibility in what is the minimum activation commitment time for your equipment and what is the maximum activation duration time that your equipment could provide that service. And then lastly, what we're looking for is more hours of service availability, as that will afford our control room more flexibility to use your service as well. The specific tender assessment criteria are all detailed in the tender guideline, which is available on our website, and I think on the supplementary capacity website, the tender website, and also on vendor panel. Now just going into the tender assessment as well in terms of what we're expecting this year. Noting that we have a reduction of the supplementary capacity target from 285 to 142, we are anticipating a more competitive response to the SC tender. And in terms of what we saw last year in terms of submissions and that reduced demand shortfall, we do see that there could be a likelihood that we have more megawatts submitted to what we require in the market. In terms of the submissions and preference, yes, we will be looking at both financial values such as lowest cost mix factors, but we'll also be looking strongly on the availability to respond, shorter notification times, reliability and service delivery for both of those contract types, ANA and ANO. Here, I just want to basically go through the valuation criteria for consideration. So, as mentioned before, it does need to be an eligible service. So, just going through these aspects, it has to meet the definition of eligible service as per the rules. If you don't meet that, then unfortunately we will fail you and you're not a valid tender. In terms of available in hot season, we are only able to accept an offer for the provision of that eligible service if it can provide during the system peak demand times coinciding with the shortfall. In terms of network access, we must have that reasonable level that you are an eligible service and you can operate with the network. And in terms of compliance with tender requirements, we will require the tender submission to comply with those requirements outlined in the tender guideline document. So all of those 4 criteria must be passed for it to be a valid tender. In terms of the evaluation criteria and how we're preferencing or scoring, I just want to go through these aspects. The first being operational factors. So this includes the minimum and maximum activation duration times. AMO will preference or score higher submissions, those with a wider range of minimum and maximum. Reason being that having a wider range allows AEMO to, I guess, more flexibly activate your service for what we consider to be appropriate time. We don't want to activate a service for a period that we don't necessarily want it for, as it may incur a higher cost to market. The other aspects to consider is the weightings on the right-hand side, which are all detailed. The other thing I did also want to pause on briefly is that relative to last year's valuation criteria, these have changed a bit in terms of their the description and their weightings. The reasoning for this is, first of all, us reviewing the rule requirements of what the criteria should be as per the rules that I've mentioned before, but the second being from operational experience from last summer, what we consider to be, I guess, the more important evaluation criteria to really emphasize low cost mix and also be able to afford more reliability and dispatch of service. So the next category is ability to respond. We are looking for short or shorter notification times and reliability of the facility to deliver the service. AEMO will obviously preference shorter notification times so that we can use that service as we need on a more flexible basis. Contracting overhead, the extent and potential contracting impact of contractual amendments for the proposed service. Total available service period, so looking at the total available hours that the service is offered throughout the hot season. Noting the time of day as well, if there are any restrictions, and maximum hours that the service could be available. And lastly, financial value, ranking the lowest cost mix of supplementary capacity contracts that address the supply scarcity risks. We will also be considering cost implications from minimum activation duration times. To emphasize, it is the same criteria and weightings for both ANA and ANO. And yes, these are all outlined in the tender guideline. Here, I just want to outline the general conditions. For each tender submission, we do treat it as confidential information under clause 2 under 10.2.3 of the ESM rules, and we'll make sure to protect that information. However, we do want to outline that the information after completion of the tender, AEMO must publish specific aspects of the supplementary capacity contract entered into or executed under 424.11b of the rules. So these details that AEMO has to publish under the rules includes the name of the service provider, the quantity contracted, whether the contract was entered through a tender process or direct negotiation, the type of eligible service it was in terms of equipment, the availability price in dollars, and the activation price in dollars per megawatt hour of activation. Those will be published on our public website.
There's a question from Ganesh relevant to this slide. Ganesh, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So you just mentioned that AEMO would prefer a shorter notice period. So does it translate into AEMO accepting slightly higher prices by a provider who is okay with shorter notice periods?
I think the way to answer that is that we will score you relative to the value that you've provided for both of those fields. I do want to caveat that the prices either must or should reflect your your cost to provide or opportunity cost. But we'd just be assessing it based on the value you've provided for that field. I think that you mentioned accepting. I think that's probably a word that I would say, I wouldn't say accepting, but we have to basically measure it or evaluate that particular value that you've given us. And that will be considered amongst the other tenders and their relative values.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. More generally, I just want to provide, I guess, some links and some resources that you can also call on for this tender. So just to emphasize first that all submissions must be made via vendor panel. We do really encourage participants to try registering as soon as practicable. One, it does allow you to, I guess, address any access issues or administrative issues early on, and also it allows you to familiarize yourself with the vendor panel platform well before the submission deadline. So if you are interested in making a submission, if you could try accessing vendor panel as soon as possible, just so that we know that you don't have any access issues close to the deadline. In terms of notifying stakeholders for the call of tender, we do have supporting information or relevant information on vendor panel, but also on our website. We have provided quite, I guess, wide resources on 3 platforms or websites. The first being vendor panel, the second being the supplementary capacity website, and the last being the tenders website. They typically will, they do provide the same information in terms of tender guideline, acknowledgement notice, tender forms, the standard contracts, the proposed NIMI spreadsheets, and frequently asked questions, and the when procedure. A point of difference, though, is that it's only the supplementary capacity website that will include the excluded TINI node identifiers. So if you are in a particular if you are a unregistered equipment, just to note that the excluded TINI list is only available on that particular website. I'll pause there. That actually brings us to the end of the tender information materials. Before I go into Q&A, yeah.
Yeah, Kung, there's no questions in the chat. So yeah, we'll just pause for a moment and allow people time to gather their thoughts, and perhaps put your hand up if you do have a question. Lloyd Owens, over to you.
G'day, had to step out of that meeting for a moment for another meeting. Could I have, will the answers be transmitted to everybody on the call as well? Because I'm interested in the NTDL and a couple of the other answers which you undoubtedly have given already.
Yes, they will be. Yes, we are planning to reflect some of these, or endeavoring to reflect some of these questions and answers on update to the FAQ. So that's probably a nice segue. So we have already published an existing FAQ for this particular procurement cycle. What we're proposing to do is actually to update it further based on questions and answers provided in the forum today. Some of the questions, though, will be maybe rephased by AEMO, just so that we can either de-identify the person providing an answer if they're going to submit one directly to us, or they may be slightly rephrased, just more so for clarity. Does that answer your question, Lloyd?
Thanks, Kung. That's it. Needed it.
No worries. So I did want to state that if you did have further questions, first of all, to refer to the frequently asked questions document that we have. It does borrow on from a lot of the questions that were asked last year, but it's always good just to have context and to confirm that it still applies this year. In terms of next steps, just want to signal to potential providers that to please note the tender process dates, to register and review the tender documentation on vendor panel, and to please prepare for a submission by 12 noon of Monday the 15th of September. After which, AEMO will assess all tender submissions according to the assessment criteria provided in the tender documentation. We will be looking to verify the eligible services and network access as soon as practicable, and that will also include verification tests so that we can have all of the contracts started in preparation for 1st of December. If you do have any following questions from this information session, we encourage all applicants to submit it by close of business Tuesday, 2nd of September, to the supplementary.capacity@aemo.website. In the interest of probity, AEMO, rather than providing a individual response to those emails, will be endeavoring to provide an update via the FAQ document with de-identified questions and answers by the website by the the following Monday, close of business, 9th of September. So everyone has equivalent, I guess, information to make an assessment on whether they'd like to make a submission or not. And that actually comes to the end of the slide. Do we have any other questions?
No, we don't, Kung. We just might wait for maybe a count of 10 for anyone to put their hand up, because we do have a few moments still available. And if when we get to then we don't have anybody with a hand up, we will close the session. Three, two, one. No hands up. Thank you very much to everybody who dialed in today. We had about 75 people on the call. Look forward to receiving your submissions, and as Kung said, there's contact details in the pack which will be published on the AEMO website, and we encourage you to get in touch.
Thank you all. Yep, thanks everyone for their time as well.